Hey, it's Terry Gorry, and this is the Irish Law and Small Business Podcast. There's an interesting case reported there today in the newspaper. It's a case that was settled in the Circuit Court in County Clare in Ennis, I think. It's to do with discrimination alleged by a traveller family against a priest, a so-called outspoken priest called Father Cummins, who refused to allow the claimant in this case, Miss Sherlock, who's a traveller lady, from attending a First Holy Communion event in Ennis Diamond. It was her niece and nephew's First Holy Communion. It's an interesting case for a couple of reasons. Because in the first instance, the claim of discrimination was brought under the Equal Status Act to the Workplace Relations Commission, and the question arose then as to whether the provision of Mass or the saying of Mass fell within the definition of a service as understood by the Equal Status Act. In other words, was it covered? And the WRC adjudicator found that it wasn't. And the case then fell by way of technicality, but it was actually appealed then to the Circuit Court, and the alleged incident of discrimination occurred 8 years ago or so, in 2015, and it's been settled now. But the priest and the bishop, in fact, have settled the case, and payments were made to Miss Sherlock, who brought the case. The background to it is that firstly, the out-of-court settlement was settled the other day at Ennis Circuit Court on Monday of this week, and today is Valentine's Day, the 14th of February. The claimant, Miss Sherlock, took separate action against the bishop, the late Martin Drennan. He's former bishop of the Diocese of Galway and Kilmacduagh, alleging discrimination. Basically, it arose, Miss Sherlock wanted to attend First Holy Communion in a Catholic church in Ennis Diamond for her niece and nephew's First Holy Communion on the 2015. Father Cummins allegedly refused entry. Judge Comerford made the out-of-court settlement between the late Martin Drennan, who died last November, and Caroline Sherlock a rule of court. The judge queried then, when the settlement terms were handed in, as to whether there was one sum or two sums. Counsel for the late Martin Drennan said separate, and on that basis the case could be struck out. Both matters were resolved, and both matters were settled on the same terms. Therefore, Miss Sherlock's claim against both the bishop and the priest were settled. The amounts paid out were not disclosed. Miss Sherlock was represented by the Free Legal Advice Centre, but they weren't in court. The case first came before the WRC back in 2020, and the adjudicator at the WRC dismissed the case. Basically, the adjudicator accepted that the services, religious services such as Holy Communions, are not covered by the Equal Status Act. The claimant alleged that on the day of her attendance at the Holy Communion, Father Cummins stopped her from entering the church due to what she was wearing. Gardaí were called to the church, but confirmed at the time that there was no public order incident. Caroline Sherlock, that's the claimant, could not be reached for comment on the settlement, but her sister celebrated, or whose two children had celebrated their communion on the day in question, welcomed the payout. Kathleen Sherlock recalled the events of May 23rd, 2015. She said, "It was humiliating. I wanted to be in the church for my baby's communion and I missed it. It ruined our day, completely destroyed it altogether. Everyone was upset." Kathleen Sherlock said that she was going in and out of the church to see what the commotion was about, and I was trying to get them in and trying to explain to the priest. There were guards there as well. She said that Caroline had a skirt above her knee, and Father Cummins didn't want her to go in due to a dress policy, but there were a lot of settled people, ladies with the same shortness of skirt, and they were allowed into the church. Kathleen said that my own daughter wasn't allowed into the church either because she had an off-the-shoulder top. Miss Sherlock said, "We missed our children's communion, which we can't get back," and she alleged that was discrimination because we were travellers. Miss Sherlock said that her faith is very important to her. However, she said she has not returned to Ennis Church since her children's Holy Communion in May 2015 and now goes to Lahinch Church instead. Miss Sherlock, who said Father Cummins had been in her home before, has not made up with the priest, and she said, "I'm very disappointed about that." Father Cummins declined to comment about when he was contacted about the out-of-court settlement. He has previously declined to comment as well. In 2021, however, it emerged that Father Cummins was staging regular Sunday morning masses at Ennis Church during a COVID-19 lockdown period. He was saying at the time that nobody had contracted the virus from attending his masses. He also denounced the planned puka of Ennis sculptor as sinister from the altar at Sunday Mass. The spokesman then for the Diocese of Galway noted that the court action was concluded, quote, without liability being determined and in terms which both parties have agreed should remain confidential, and wouldn't make any further comment. The spokesman declined to comment when asked if the diocese had covered the legal costs of Father Cummins or the late Bishop Drennan or made the payments referred to in court. A spokeswoman for FLAC stated that it cannot make a comment on the case at this time, given the terms of the settlement. Interestingly, when the church is struggling to get people to attend, when there is falling attendances, and I've seen this myself, you'd imagine that the church and the individual priests would be more encouraging of people into various ceremonies and functions, etc. For example, Mass and First Holy Communion. But obviously this case then has been settled, there has been a payout, and it's basically to do with the alleged discrimination against travellers in respect of access to services. And the legal issue that arose at the WRC was interesting insofar as it was held that the provision of mass services, etc., doesn't fall within the Equal Status Acts, but I'm not sure that that would be the case had the case gone ahead at the Circuit Court, or indeed if the decision was appealed to the Labour Court. That remains to be seen. Interesting case. This priest is outspoken, and notwithstanding the fact that he's outspoken, he hasn't made any comment on this. And previously, when the incident first blew up, he was asked for quotes on the situation, or asked for comment, but he had not returned 5 calls from the Irish Times over a 2-day period, nor had he visited the Sherlock family in the town, 2 of whom he allegedly refused entrance to the church, telling them that they were dressed inappropriately. And the spokesman for the Diocese of Galway declined to comment at the time, saying that the matter was addressed privately, or best addressed privately and locally. This was back in 2015. But it was put to him that it had not been addressed privately or locally a week after the alleged incident. He said, for all concerned, such things are best not played out in the media. There's no doubt about it. Things like this are best not played out in the media when you are the person at the receiving end of this claim, because clearly it is embarrassing. Gardaí were actually called to the church in Ennis at 11 a.m. on the day in question. A spokesman for the guards confirmed that there was no public order incident or breach of the peace detected, and no one was arrested. But clearly, if somebody's refused entry to a First Holy Communion, and it's a niece and a nephew who is is receiving First Holy Communion, and you're being excluded or prevented, barred essentially from going in as a consequence of what you're wearing, it's unusual, now to put it mildly, because I've seen people at Mass wearing all sorts of clothing, and obviously the key thing is that they're showing up for whatever service and to worship or whatever they're doing. Anyway, it's an interesting case. As I say, it was settled yesterday in the Circuit Court in Ennis.